So here we are on a very lovely, warm spring / almost summer night here at Abhayagiri. Windows open, upper vents open, little soft breeze coming in. The winter has been long and wet and cool. Flowers are starting to bloom in the courtyard. It's quite beautiful time of year. Also, allergies, sniffles, people running with running noses and watery eyes. Flies starting to appear. I've got one buzzing around my ears and nose right this very minute. So it's always a 50-50 kind of a thing, but to put our attention on the pleasant stuff while we've got it can be soothing to the senses. I've been doing a fair amount of talking the past couple of weeks, various venues that we've just picked up again after the pandemic. Years of not going down to Berkeley for the first Tuesday of every month, not going to Fort Bragg for the third Monday of every month, and not going down into Ukiah for the second Wednesday of every month. 3 once-a-month venues that we stopped doing for 3 years, essentially, and we're just picking them up again. And I've, the past couple of weeks, have been going around to these various places, starting out the rotation, and so been talking a lot, engaging quite a bit, getting these things started, and it's been delightful. Also kind of running out of things to talk about. But one theme did come up a couple of nights ago when I was down in Ukiah at the Sudna Center, where we've started the Ukiah group again on a monthly basis. And I thought I'd just pick up. It was from the questions and answer session that we did at the end of the evening. And one of the attendees was talking about the difficulty he had with settling down on the breath as his meditation object. He experiences a lot of what he termed the monkey mind, a lot of thinking and darting about the thinking process, just the relentless nattering on that goes in the thinking process, and living a fairly engaged life. And when it comes time to settle in meditation in the evening, I think in particular, or any time during the day, but he was experiencing just this inability, in his words, I think, to settle down with the anapanasati, the breathing in and out. And it just seemed quite frustrating, which it will be when that happens. I suspect that most of us can relate to that experience. It's not at all uncommon. In fact, it's more common than not, probably, for most people, at least at periods of time, for the mind not to be able to settle easily. So he was asking for some guidance on that, and various thoughts came up to my mind, but one is to not expect the mind to stop its thinking. Kind of the intellect, the duty, in a sense, of the intellect in some ways is to produce thoughts. That's one of its functions. And so to actually expect, especially right at the beginning, that an important goal is to annihilate thinking. If you have that kind of attitude around it, it's just probably going to reinforce it even more, because there's a certain tension that gets introduced into the process of meditation if you think you've got to, with some force, annihilate the thinking process. With time and practice and patience and rightful consideration of your meditation object, it can happen that the thinking process does start to settle, and one can experience less obsession with thoughts. But to have that as your goal, your expectation, particularly as you're starting to wind down, is just going to introduce a lot of frustration. So the object is not to annihilate thinking, but to sort of learn how to be with it and take it less seriously, maybe pay less attention to it, and give it a lot more space, developing spaciousness in the mind that isn't trying to push things away, but trying to hold objects of the mind as they come through the mind with less attachment, less clinging, less holding. And that involves opening up, not attending to the content of the thoughts, but stepping back, opening up a space in the mind through which the thoughts can more easily arise and pass away on their own accord. And not to force that, but just to let that happen. Mindfulness of breathing is really a pretty subtle kind of practice. The breath is actually a fairly subtle object. And if the mind isn't ready for it, if the mind isn't prepared to be with that kind of more subtle object, just from the general engagement of the day, particularly if you have got a job or a situation that involves a lot of conceptual processing, attention in that realm, then one sometimes needs to take up a theme that's a little bit more active, using the thinking process as a friend, as an aid, rather than as an enemy to get rid of. And the Buddha refers to that in a teaching where he refers to it as using directed meditation versus non-directed meditation. So, as the teaching goes, when the mind develops or experiences a fever or sluggishness or a kind of scattered externally kind of experience, then it's useful, particularly if you're, say, engaged in a satipatthana meditation, often mindfulness of breathing as one of the primary satipatthana meditations. If one is doing that and one of these states arises, like a fever in the body, meaning kind of heated or kind of enthralled with sensual thoughts, or maybe thoughts of aversion or irritation, or a sluggishness in the body if you just keep on conking out, fading out through sloth and torpor, or a kind of a scattered agitation, attention darting around all over the place, the monkey mind, then to set aside that satipatthana theme, set aside the mindfulness, the attempt to do mindfulness of breathing, and focus on something that's more inspiring, actively inspiring, as a way of helping to settle that mind. Lots of different kinds of inspiring themes or contemplations that the Buddha introduces throughout the discourses that aren't necessarily satipatthana contemplations, the four foundations of mindfulness, the four establishings of mindfulness outline a number of themes to frames of reference that one can pay attention to and develop as the basis for developing calm and insight and leading to samma samadhi. Those are essentially the contemplations of Satipatthana, found in Satipatthana. But there's a number of other contemplations that can be used to help develop that more settled mind when the Satipatthana contemplations are not appropriate and not working. A number of them, several of them, are expressed in what's called the six recollections, so that one can actively take these up using the thinking process. The first one of these six is the contemplation of the Buddha, and then, of course, the next two, contemplation of the Dhamma, contemplation of the sangha. So picking up the triple gem is an act of contemplation, and using your thinking process to consider, say, for the first one, the qualities of the Buddha, recollecting his life story, actually telling yourself a story, reciting some passages, or remembering some of the aspects of his path to enlightenment, taking up the various practices that didn't work so well, learning from that, and going through the history of what it is that he realized and how he did that, and the amount of commitment and determination and all the qualities that he had to develop on his own without a teacher to realize the path, to rediscover the path that Buddhas of the past had discovered. He had some teachers, but they weren't fully accomplished teachers. They hadn't realized the path that the Buddha was looking for of complete liberation. So he rediscovered that on his own, and the amount of absolute commitment that took to see it through to completion. And the compassion that he felt a little bit later on to share that and teach that for 45 years after he realized full liberation. There's a good friend, former monk, a good friend of mine, who used the Buddha Nusati, contemplation of the Buddha, as one of his primary practices. And he would describe, sometimes just in his contemplation and his sitting there, imagining that he was actually in the presence of the Buddha as a living being, and coming to the Buddha with all, the various conflicts and difficulties he might be experiencing, and knowing that the Buddha was able to know those qualities, and just feeling and experiencing the immense compassion that the Buddha would have had for him had he been there in person. And, just that no matter what it is that he was experiencing, no matter how difficult or whatever experience he was having, that the Buddha would understand and say, "Oh, that's okay. This is part of being a human being," and give some wise instruction with a very expanded, boundless, compassionate, and wise presence. And that contemplation was very, very useful, very beneficial over many years. So contemplation of the Buddha is one inspiring theme that one could pick up. Contemplation of the Dhamma, the teaching that the Buddha left. As I said, 45 years of sharing that, establishing a dispensation in the world that has lasted for almost 2,600 years now, moving in that direction. And that, as best we can tell, it's still the true Dhamma. It can be found. Sometimes it seems like false Dhammas are starting to appear in various aspects of the teachings, but with a relative sense of ease or certainty, one can say that the dispensation is still here. The teachings are still available, and they're still clearly elucidated, and they're there for us to understand and to benefit from. It's a teaching that often is described as beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end, through all of its various aspects and phases, based on the Four Noble Truths, truth of suffering and the cessation of suffering, and carefully detailed all along the way with not just a theory or a promise or you have to believe in this to gain benefit from it, but as a real practical guide, the Eightfold Path, and all of the teachings that are bound up with the Eightfold Path. It's a complete package, and is useful right from the very beginning. The benefits are realized. Happiness, a real firm sense of happiness can be found in following the threefold path of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. But even starting with just Sila, even if Samadhi and Panya, concentration and wisdom, aren't developed to any large extent, practicing precepts brings a tremendous amount of goodness and happiness into one's life and into the world. So appreciating that and recognizing that and realizing that one's own inspiration to practice even just the precepts as we took tonight is of immense benefit. And what a gift that the Buddha brought into the world by elucidating those precepts. Not to mention the rest of the path, the development of the higher mind, adhicitta, the samadhi, bringing in a sense of collectedness and composure, and stillness into the mind, and using that as a basis for contemplation of how suffering arises and the path leading to the complete cessation of suffering. So the full development, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, that encompasses the teachings that are still here, still very practicable. So just thinking about that, using the words, recollecting it, giving yourself a little Dhamma talk, can be very settling, inspiring. Recollection of the sangha, the way that it manifests in the world, the fellow practitioners who are committed to the path, our support systems, our teachers. And just even knowing that there are beings in the world who have realized the truth, have experienced the truth at all different levels, right from the beginning, but maybe not having completed the path, the stream enterers, all the way up to the arahants that do exist in this very era, in this very decade, in this we can point to probably a few within our own Thai forest tradition who have completed their work, and we can get to know them, get to know their stories, get to know their teachings, hopefully spend time with them if the opportunity arises, and recollect them, remember them, and let that bring up a sense of immense contentment and appreciation. Refuge. There's also specifically the recollection of virtue sila, as I mentioned, as part of the recollection of the Dhamma as well, as a specific contemplation, and just reflecting on the goodness that arises from following even the first 4 precepts, refraining from taking life, refraining from taking that which is not given, refraining from any kind of harmful sexual activity, and refraining from lying, or misrepresenting the truth, and by extension also harsh speech, useless speech. And just realizing the amount of peace of mind that following precepts gives, and reflecting on that to the extent that you've been able to keep precepts. Remembering what it was like maybe before you took up the precepts, and now that you've taken them up, or taken up some of them, looking at the quality of the mind as a result, particularly over a longer period of time. And, watching when the mind gets critical of itself. I remember when I was just an anagarika in my first year at the monastery here, as we were opening, I was going through a tough spell, a self-critical spell of not developing much settledness or peace of mind, and Ajahn Sucitto was visiting, my first time I met him, and I was kind of lamenting my story to him, and he said, well, you got to think of this. Have you actually killed anybody today? And I had to admit that I hadn't. It was not only light and humorous, but also a good thing to remember, because when you think about it, not everybody can say that. And probably that very day, as happens on every day, there's killing that happens, people taking the life of other human beings. So I, was able to reflect on that goodness, and in fact, I hadn't actually killed any sentient being that day. So, taking it to its logical conclusion of really reflecting on what you have been able to hold to, what you have been able to do, rather than lamenting about your lack of goodness, or your lack of ability to meditate, or the general hopelessness of your life. Go back to the fundamentals, go back to the basics of recollecting sila and how it feels. Another recollection of Chaganusati, the recollection of giving, more broadly the quality of generosity and what that feels like. And it can go in different ways. Sometimes it's easier to start with trying to recollect when somebody has been generous to you, when somebody has been kind to you and offered their time or their support or material support, if that's the case, as it is with monastics. And feeling that sense of gratitude, appreciation of being maybe held and accepted and supported, listened to. What a wonderful feeling it is to actually have been heard, to have been, really held by the attention of somebody who wants to know what's going on. What does that feel like? And appreciating the good qualities that came from that person, in their attempt to be there for you. So most of us probably have had at least one incident in our lives where that's happened from someone. And to bring that to mind, bring the image of that person to mind, bring the memory of the particular event, the incident, to mind. Or something that evokes a sense of appreciation, tenderness, kindness to the heart. Using the memory, the thinking process again in that way. And then also recollecting some way that we've done the same thing for somebody else. Some form of kindness or generosity, maybe offering support materially to somebody who needs it, or some organization, charitable organization that can benefit from some spare change that you've got, or sometimes even more importantly, that sense of giving to somebody else. When have you been there for somebody else? You've been able to step back from your world for at least a period of time, even if it's just a few minutes, to actually be fully present for someone. And to be a sounding board, or to offer a helping hand, caring for a relative, friend, and just bringing that to mind, thinking about it, remembering the image, remembering the incident, and enjoying the feeling that comes from doing that. Kind of basking in that uplift that comes to the mind when thinking about it. So Chaganisati, recollection of giving. The Buddha also suggests one that we don't talk about a whole lot, but can be, depending on your own beliefs and proclivities, a very inspiring thing too, recollection of the devas, the celestial beings, particularly along the lines of what it took for them to be reborn in, a very high, beautiful realm of experience, the heavenly realms, and essentially that it's based on those previous two qualities, the qualities of sila, the quality of generosity, and that aspiration for goodness, and making that a central theme of their lives and the results that come from that. The happiness that comes from that in that plane of rebirth. So recollecting some of the stories, if you like to think about other realms and beings in other realms, there's a great book on Buddhist cosmology by Ajahn Karunadhammo. It's actually a couple copies available in our library. It's not so easy to find. It's not a commercially published book, but goes into great detail about all the different realms that are talked about in various suttas, but also more in the commentaries, different commentaries, later editions. And it talks about, in detail, all the wonderful and marvelous and excellent qualities that can be found and experienced in these other realms. So it's a nice way of adding some interest to your contemplation and bringing a sense of uplift, easefulness, enjoyment to the mind. So those are the 6 basic recollections that the Buddha talks about. There's other ones too, interspersed throughout all of the teachings, that can help compose the mind, settle the mind when it's moving about. Particularly if there's a period that you're experiencing of kind of driftiness, or maybe that kind of sluggishness of mind, that inattention that is recommended, Maranasati, the contemplation of death. We've talked a lot about that the past couple of weeks with our very good friend Daniel Fry, young man, 39 years old, regular attendee, at least on a weekly basis, often here at the monastery, lived just 2 miles down the street. His very sudden and unexpected death from kind of a freak accident. So that's brought up a lot of contemplations of death, a lot of reflections from members of the community in the evening teachings and also in the morning reflections. And remembering the fleetingness and the unpredictability of our lives. Not to get complacent, because tomorrow, who knows, death may come. It helps to really instill an acute sense of urgency not to waste time, this precious opportunity to practice. We've got our faculties intact, we've got the requisites we need, we've got the opportunities, the teachings are here and available, we've come to them to learn. So how rare that is. And we don't know when will be the next one to die unexpectedly. So using that to wake up, bring energy, stir us out of driftiness, stir us out of sluggishness, focusing on our priorities. How do we want to live the rest of our life, particularly if it's going to end in 24 hours or less? So recollection of death, Maranasati. Many ways to do that. I won't go into much detail now because we've talked about it quite a bit the past couple of weeks. One of my favorite recollections, contemplations, is one called Recollecting, Contemplating the Peace of Nibbana. Upasamanusati. And there was a question at tea time the other night about, kind of the nature of Nibbana. What we're, talking about, one of the resources that we have that discusses it, the book The Island that Lumpur Pasano and Ajahn Karunadhammo wrote together some years ago, that talks about the goal, Nibbana. And the Buddha, didn't talk about it a huge amount, but there were so many references and descriptions of the qualities. It's something that's hard to pin down in concepts because it's beyond the conceptual realm. The teachings all point in that direction and talk about the qualities that one can experience along the way and upon realization. And those are worth considering as a perception, drawing it up as a fabricated perception in the mind, a perception of peace, just to sort of say, well, I can't define it so specifically. Lots of words can be used to help describe a lot of the qualities. But to bring up a sense of what would it be like? What would it be like even if I haven't experienced Nibbana or the kind of cooling and ending of suffering, as it sometimes is described. But I can use my imagination to establish a perception based on some of the words that the Buddha used in describing the goal, Nibbana. There's a wonderful several lines that you've heard before probably, but it's always worth repeating, and I find it's actually worth in those moments when I need a directed kind of meditation to just recite them in my own mind and reflect on them and consider them and what each of those lines means. This is peaceful. This is sublime. The stilling of all formations, the relinquishment of all acquisitions, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. So, starting, this is peaceful, this is sublime, but the stilling of all formations, sankhara, formations are all these constructions, these fabrications of body, speech, and mind, all the actions we take with intention, all the ways we speak intentionally, and thoughts, actions of mind, the intellect. These formations that are based oftentimes on reactivity, the underlying tendencies, the underlying causes of greed, hatred, delusion, the hindrances that occupy our minds, our hearts, and the formations that come from them. And the fact that upon realization, or even in bits of insight and experiences of samadhi in a temporary format, that these come to stillness. They either cease completely or are held in abeyance for a period of time, and just quiet down, settle down. These movements of mind can be described as movements of mind, karmic formations arising, passing away, and when not seen clearly and when not released, just form our experience. But these have an opportunity to settle and to still, and a quality of nibbana, the unconditioned, is the stilling of these formations. They just finally settle down and stop. What would that be like? Those underlying tendencies are just... So we can imagine what it might be like to have a moment even of the stilling of all formations, the quelling of that train of sankhara. It doesn't mean that we're a completely blank experience, but it means that we're not hopping on that train, we're not jumping on that train. The train may come through, but our awareness, our hearts don't engage with it, don't jump onto it. The relinquishment of all acquisitions being translation of the word upadhi, sometimes translated also as the constituents of existence. So it's not just like the relinquishment of acquisitions, meaning giving up possessions in a material sense, but the relinquishment of the bases for how we experience existence and being. And those refer to the five khandhas as affected by clinging, particularly with the clinging of the sense I am, a sense of me, mine, myself, in relation to this body, in relation to this mind. And how that sense of ownership, that sense of self, that sense of me, of being, can cease. We still experience a body and mental factors, but without that identification. So this is what's meant by upadhi. And to think, what would that be like? Just to have this knowing of the body, this knowing of the mind, but a separateness between the two, where we're not clinging onto that sense of self, that perception of self. Stepping back from being entranced by a sense of an ego. Peaceful, sublime. What a relief. Destruction of craving, that constant movement towards trying to seek pleasure, trying to get away from unpleasant feeling, those are the root causes of suffering, or essentially the movement of the mind towards fear, anxiety, cloudiness, confusion. the delusion aspects of our experience. Destruction of craving. You can see the stillness that comes from that. The sense that, what a relief. So those three aspects, those three contemplations, stilling of formations, relinquishment of constituents of being or acquisitions, sense of self, and the ending of craving. Dispassion, just not buying into it, not wanting to get involved with it all anymore, having had enough, not interested. Ceasing, cessation, the full, complete quieting and non-arising, nirodha, in its most developed form of non-arising. Nibbana, just that coolness, the ending of confusion, the cessation of becoming, as Sariputta talks about, Nibbana is the cessation of becoming. Just not needing to exist in a self obsessed way. Not annihilation. It's not an annihilation of all experience, but it's a disentanglement from all of the ways that we can experience our reality that lead to suffering. So that's some descriptors of the peace of Nibbana that are good to bring up, reflect on, bring to mind. It's a way of settling. So if any of those words or contemplations have had an effect, just as I've been talking about them, and have helped kind of settle and soothe your own minds, what does that feel like right now? Can you tune into your body for a second and feel the breathing? So these kinds of contemplations or reflections are ways we can set up the mind, can bring a sense of ease, pamoja. That's what we're looking to develop, this sense of ease that then establishes a space for us to be able to then set aside those more active contemplations and return to satipatthana, possibly even the mindfulness of breathing. But then the breath is, you're not forcing yourself to go find the breath and look at it and attend to it as an object of concentration. It's there. It just comes and it descends into your awareness. And this is where samatha vipassana kind of come together. One supports the other. Having an active reflection can help settle the mind. And then one allows oneself to develop that more fully. Back to the non-directed, what they call the non-directed meditation, referring basically to the more fundamental satipatthana contemplations, all four foundations, if not four frames of reference. So it's much better to do something like that in my mind than to kind of just doggedly try and pursue with a lot of frustration an object that's not working at the time, trying to fulfill the expectation that one should be able to always be able to focus on the breathing. If your mind is settled enough and able enough to do that from the get-go, that's great, do it. But many times we need to start with something a little more active, contemplative, using the thinking process to our advantage, not being the victim or the prisoner of a completely distracted monkey mind, but harnessing that energy and that ability to bring a sense of easefulness. So just to I can reflect with gratitude that the Buddha gave us so many different tools to use in this practice, and that a lot of our practice is developing this toolkit that we can choose from, depending on what's arising at any particular time, to use that with wisdom and to evaluate the effects of it. So I think I'll just leave it there for this evening, offer that for however useful it may be.